The college basketball transfer portal is about to open, and we just got a ton of new names that have announced their intentions to enter the portal as soon as it does. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down all of those new names and predicting where I think they could end up. So let's go ahead and jump into the video. But another big name that announced they'll be entering the portal is PJ Haggerty from Kansas State, and Haggerty brings arguably the most proven scoring production for anyone that's in the portal right now, and it's not really close. Haggerty averaged 23.5 points per game this past season, and he finished as one of the top scorers in the entire country, while also adding in 5.5 rebounds and nearly 4 assists, and showed he can carry a massive offensive load for a team. And what makes Haggerty especially interesting is his journey, because this is going to be his 5th school in 5 years, but despite that, he has consistently produced at a high level across multiple different teams. But in my opinion, his best season previously came at Memphis, which raises an important question about fit and environment, because I think those are important to where Haggerty ends up landing. Because if he does end up in the right offensive system again, he has legitimate All-American upside. So I could see him going back to Memphis, or he could end up with a team like NC State or Ole Miss, who both need lead guards and previously recruited him. But Haggerty wasn't the only Kansas State guard to transfer, because Abd Basher Jr. also announced his intentions to enter the portal, and he was one of the most efficient perimeter shooters this past season, and his skill set is extremely valuable in today's game. He averaged 13 points per game for the Wildcats, but shot an elite 44.5% from 3, making him one of the top shooters in the country. However, his season was cut short due to a foot injury that required surgery, which does introduce some uncertainty around his health. But Basher is a legitimate floor spacer who can dramatically impact a team's offense, and he's proven that he can be one of the top scorers, because previously at Monmouth, he averaged over 20 points per game. And with his ability to shoot it, I could see a team like Alabama making sense for him, but also Auburn, because his brother does play there. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to be one of the more sought after players in the portal. But the biggest loser in the transfer portal today was the Kansas Jayhawks, because they had 3 different players announce their intentions to enter. And first, the biggest one has to be Bryson Tiller, because he's one of the most intriguing upside bets in the portal right now. This past season, Tiller stepped into a major role with Kansas, starting 31 games and averaging 8 points and 6 rebounds. And although those numbers don't jump off the page, you have to consider the guys he was playing with, like Flory Badunga alongside him in the front court, as well as Darren Peterson, who could be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. But during the season, he showed the ability to stretch the floor and defend multiple positions, but consistency was a bit of an issue for him throughout the year. But to me, he is one of the forwards with the highest upside that's available in the portal right now, and I think some potential schools could be Alabama or UNC, but wherever he ends up, I think he's one of the best gets in the portal right now. And the other 2 Jayhawks to enter the portal were Paul Mbia and Elmarco Jackson, and both of these guys didn't necessarily have the biggest role with the Jayhawks this past season, but they each showed some promise and definitely have high upside and multiple years of eligibility remaining. And at this point, Kansas is going to have to place almost their entire roster for next season. But an even bigger name out of the Big 12 that entered the portal was Lawan Watts from Texas Tech, and he averaged 12 points, 6 rebounds, and 2.5 assists this past season for Texas Tech, and showed he can contribute across the board. But when JT Toppin went out for injury, Watts stepped into a larger role late and helped Texas Tech reach the second round of the NCAA tournament. And his ability to be a plug-and-play forward can fit into multiple winning lineups, and I could see a team like Kansas or maybe even Gonzaga going after him with his ability to play multiple positions. But he's going to be an interesting name to monitor in the portal. Next, we have Sha Abay from Cincinnati, and he's one of the more intriguing young players in the portal, especially because of the fact that he was a top 30 recruit last year as a freshman. Abay averaged just 7 points in a limited role with Cincinnati, but definitely showed some flashes of scoring and versatility that made him such a highly regarded prospect, and his decision to transfer comes amid a coaching change at Cincinnati with Wes Miller now out. But Abay is the type of player who could benefit significantly from a change of scenery and a more defined role, and I still think he has the upside, but maybe more of a long-term developmental project than what we originally thought. But he chose Cincinnati over schools like Auburn, Arkansas, and Oregon during his recruitment, so I could see these schools being interested, but I could also see him going to a smaller school like Dayton. But one of the biggest names to just announce that they're going to be entering the portal is Mcun Guth from San Diego State, and he did enter the portal last offseason, but decided to return to the Aztecs. But now he's once again one of the most unique big men to enter the transfer portal, and his combination of size, shooting, and defensive impact immediately makes him one of the most intriguing front court players available, and probably one of the more sought after ones. Guth is 7 feet tall and averaged 9 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. And he shot an impressive 43% from three, while also winning the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year in 2025. And his combination of skill is extremely rare and incredibly valuable in today's game, because he can protect the rim, stretch the floor, and fit into multiple systems, which is exactly what high-level programs are looking for. And last offseason, he already had major programs like Michigan and Kentucky pursuing him before, so they could once again. But I also could see UCLA and USC both being in the mix if he wants to stay in California. But wherever he lands, he's going to be a key piece and could draw some serious NBA attention, because he has one of the most unique profiles of anyone in the portal right now. And next we got Mohamed Diabate from Kentucky. And Diabate is a high-energy forward who brings efficiency and defensive activity, even if his offensive game isn't necessarily the best. With the Wildcats this past season, he averaged 9 points, 5.5 rebounds, while shooting over 54% from the field, and showed he can finish effectively around the rim. He also contributes defensively with steals and blocks, so adds value on that end of the floor as well. However, he does lack perimeter shooting, as he shot just over 21% from three this season. But despite that, Diabate was part of Alabama's Elite Eight run a few seasons ago before transferring to Kentucky. And with his current skill set, I could see teams like North Carolina and UConn maybe going after him, as they're going to need some front court pieces with who they're going to be losing this year. But overall, his lack of three-point shooting does limit his potential landing spots a bit, but he's still one of the more solid players in the portal right now. But Alabama is also losing one of their forwards, and that's Taylor Bol Bowen, and he was with the Crimson Tide for just one season. Bol Bowen is a stretch forward, has shown the ability to space the floor, although his production dipped this past season with Alabama. He shot over 40% from three at Florida State 2 seasons ago, but this past season, his percentage dropped to just over 30%, which did impact his role and consistency with the Crimson Tide. He averaged 6.5 points and 4 rebounds, but also dealt with some health issues that limited his availability at times. But despite that, his shooting upside is still very real, and at his size, that skill set is highly valuable. But if he can return to his previous shooting form, he could be a strong complementary piece for a team needing front court spacing. But the bigger name from Alabama that's entering the portal is their big man, Aiden Sherrell, and he's going to be one of the more productive big men in the transfer portal this offseason, because he's coming off a season where he averaged 11 points, 6 rebounds, and over 2 blocks per game as a full-time starter with the Crimson Tide, and he took a significant step forward this year as a sophomore and became a key piece for an Alabama team that made a run to the Sweet 16, and his ability to protect the rim while also contributing offensively makes him a valuable two-way player. And Sherrell plays with physicality and has shown he can handle increased responsibility, and Sherrell plays with physicality and even has shown the ability to step out and hit it from deep. And it's looking likely that Sherrell is going to be looking to go somewhere back home, as he's from Detroit, Michigan. So I'm thinking either Michigan or Michigan State are going to be the potential landing spots for him. And if I had to guess, I'm going with Tom Izzo and the Spartans to be where Aiden Sherrell is going to be playing next season. But another SEC team that just lost to a big man was Florida with Micah Han Logden. And Han Logden was one of the backup centers for Florida, and he averaged just 4 points and 6 rebounds, but had a limited role this past season as he had to play behind Alex Condon and Ruben Chinlu. But his impact definitely goes beyond the box score. He provided solid rebounding, interior defense, and physicality when he was out on the floor, and helped add valuable depth to the Florida's front court. However, he is applying for a waiver for a potential additional year of eligibility, so he may not be able to play next season, but if he does, I think he's going to head back closer to home, which is North Carolina. So I could see a team like NC State, who is going to need to rebuild, as well as maybe even a Missouri, as teams that could be interested in Han Logden. But Tennessee also lost a few guys to the portal today, and first up, it was JP Estrella from Tennessee, and Estrella is one of the more intriguing front court players in the portal because of his combination of size, skill, and versatility. The 6'11" forward averaged 10 points and 5.5 rebounds for the Volunteers, and showed the ability to score both inside and out And Estrella's mobility and ability to stretch the floor give him a modern skill set that fits well into today's game, and he also brings defensive effort and rebounding, making him a well-rounded option. And with NC State hiring former Tennessee assistant coach Justin Gainey as their new head coach, this could be a place where Estrella ends up, but I also think he's going to demand a lot in the portal, so I could see some of the big teams like Duke, Kentucky, Michigan, or anyone else that's needing a big man to be interested. And then another player from Tennessee that entered the portal was Bishop Boswell, and Boswell is a steady, experienced guard, and he brought balance across multiple areas for the Tennessee Volunteers. He averaged 6 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3 assists, and shot efficiently from both inside and outside the arc. But what stood out to me most was his ability to contribute without needing high usage, because he was a very strong complementary piece for the Volunteers behind Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Ament. And he seems like the perfect guy that's going to follow Justin Gainey to NC State. But another huge name that just entered the portal is DJ Wagner from Arkansas, and Wagner is one of the most recognizable names in the portal due to his pedigree as a former elite recruit, but his college production has yet to fully match those expectations. This past season, he averaged just 7.5 points and 2.5 assists this season, while transitioning into a more of a rotational role behind Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas with the Razorbacks. But despite that, he still logged significant minutes and contributed to Arkansas's overall success this season. And Wagner definitely has talent, that's undeniable, but there still is room for growth. But with his upside and what we've seen so far in his career, I could see him going back home to a school in the Northeast, so maybe a Big East school like St. John's could be interested. But there's also been reports linking DJ Wagner to Memphis as a potential destination for him. But there were also a lot of freshmen that entered the portal, and the top one for me right now has to be Acaden Lewis from Villanova, because he's a highly intriguing young guard from the Wildcats who produced immediately as a freshman. He averaged 12 points and 5.5 assists and demonstrated the ability to both score and create for others in his freshman season. And while his three-point shooting remains an area for improvement, his overall efficiency and feel for the game stand out. And now he'll be entering the portal while testing the NBA draft waters, and he presents both immediate impact potential and long-term upside for a team looking for a dynamic league guard. And the first team that immediately pops out is Mark Pope and Kentucky. But I could also see him going to Maryland because he's from the Washington, D.C. area. But he's someone I'm going to monitor closely that's in the portal. Next, we have Derek Dixon from North Carolina. And although North Carolina just announced their new head coach, Mike Malone, it has caused a domino effect of players entering the portal. And Dixon isn't the only one. But I would say he is the most notable because his stock has been trending upward after a strong finish to the season. He only averaged 6.5 points, but shot nearly 40% from three. And so he established himself as a reliable perimeter shooter, and what makes him especially intriguing is how well he played late in the year. And I think Dixon is the type of player who could thrive in a system that prioritizes spacing and guard play. But the two teams I've seen the most for Dixon are Maryland and Georgetown, which could be great landing spots because it would allow him to take the reins of the offense and develop over multiple years. And finally, we have Matthew Abel from NC State, and he's going to be one of the top young prospects in the portal, and his decision, I think, is heavily tied to Will Wade leaving NC State and heading to LSU. Abel is a former top 25 recruit, and he averaged nearly 9 points as a freshman while coming off the bench for the Wolfpack, but he showed flashes of scoring ability and defensive activity, and his production increased in conference play, which is just a very strong sign to me. And regardless of where he lands, his combination of talent and upside makes him a potential breakout candidate as a sophomore. But with Will Wade leaving, I do think Abel might be following him to LSU. But that wraps it up for this one. Let me know in the comments down below who your favorite new portal addition is, and who do you think your team should be going after. Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more transfer portal content, and I'll see you in the next one.